despite Xi Jinping's decision to stay away, this is really being seen as a win for Modi and a win for India.
Well, you're right, a win for Modi, a win for India, and Xi Jinping's absence gave Modi the opportunity to step up, play the role of the leader of the global south. Remember that it is a role that China itself aspires to. But here, without Xi Jinping, Modi is taking the helm. You know, we talked about how the communique was at risk coming into this particular summit, but not only did India manage to cobble up a communique, it came on day one of the two-day summit, which is a feat for India. There was huge disparity in terms of opinion, a huge risk that it will not succeed because the division was so wide, yet India managed to convince the US as well as its allies to use the language that is acceptable to everybody at the table. They toned down the language, pushed back on what the US wanted, which was Russia's aggression against Ukraine. So here we are with a communique, everybody feeling pretty triumphant, including the European Union. Now, there were other successes as well, Heidi. We know that in terms of the loans being extended to emerging economies, the U.S. has agreed to perhaps expand that capital through the World Bank. We've been talking about restructuring of multilateral development banks, and that was part of the conversation. Also a win. G-20 will include the African Union, just like we saw the expansion of the BRICS summit just 2 weeks ago.
Right, and with Russia and China not there, has it allowed for all sorts of different kinds of alliances and, you know, break off meetings and so on, and that's where some of these wins came from. What's this we're hearing about the US wanting to counter China's Belt and Road initiative and in the Middle East?
Well, Vani, you're right. I mean, it wasn't just an opportunity for India. It was also an opportunity for the U.S. to engage better with everybody at the table, including members of the Global South. A deal was struck between the U.S., India, the Middle East, Israel, as well as other Middle Eastern countries. And it is significant because we saw how the Middle East and the U.S. came together. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman actually shook hands with Biden along with Modi. It was a three-way handshake. It wasn't too long ago that Biden called the Crown Prince the pariah. Now, they agreed to work together on rail and maritime projects across the region. It is to counter China's Belt and Road initiative, but it was not intended to be, as expressed by Biden himself, but according to European Union officials, it is not a bad thing to have the U.S. at the table countering what China is trying to do in terms of influence.
And President Biden missed the second day of the G20 as he was making his way to Vietnam, and some pretty interesting comments when it comes to China and Taiwan.
Well, that's right. In fact, President Biden talked about how economically weakened China is right now. And because of that, it is limited in terms of its capacity to attack Taiwan. In fact, he said that I guess, likelihood has been reduced tremendously. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
I don't think it's going to cause China to invade Taiwan. In fact, the opposite, probably to have the same capacity that it had before. But as I said, we're not looking to hurt China. Sincerely. We're all better off if China does what?
Remember that not too long ago, Biden called China the ticking bomb. So it is in the right vein right here as well, that comment coming from Vietnam. It is also important to note that Vietnam and the U.S. has deepened their partnership. In fact, Vietnam elevated that partnership to the highest level that it accords to only the likes of Russia as well as China. It is a pushback to China. It is addressing its anxieties with Beijing and is willing to raise that partnership with the U.S. Remember that Vietnam is a communist nation, never to be an ally of the U.S., and yet here it is establishing very close relationships with the U.S.
Well, and interestingly, and perhaps on a more superficial level, I was noticing the comments that the Vietnam leader gave to President Biden, extraordinarily flattering comments. Give us some more of those maybe standout moments, Haslinda, some colour.
Well, you know, there are plenty of color. First thing, we had Prime Minister Trudeau getting stuck last night because of his apparent technical difficulties with his plane. So, you know, there was a lot of hoo-ha that he missed the gala dinner organized by Modi. Coincidentally, he had to stay yet another day because of the troubles. One moment that really stood out for me was that hug between Prime Minister Modi as well as Prime Minister Rishi Sunak of the UK. We had Sunak quipping that he is the son-in-law of India, given that he is married to an Indian and he is of Indian heritage as well. That hug was pretty apparent, some kind of, I guess, a warm moment between the two leaders. The other moment that stood out really was when Modi led the other G20 leaders barefoot to pay respects to Mahatma Gandhi. It was quite a sight to see here at the G20.